the two core vocabularies, core business and core person. We have some issues on core business and few of them in core person. And then in the last part on CPSV-AP. During the issue, like we've done, we already done in the past, we have, let's say, we will discuss them one by one, and we see if we found consensus in the resolving of the issue. Some issue might be more complex, other less. So I hope indeed we should make it on time. If we do it shorter, even better. But let's see one by one all the issues. Here I skip this part as Natasha already presented the introduction on core vocabularies. So I go straight forward to the issues on core business vocabulary. As you can see here, we are in core business 2.0. With this, at this moment, let's say the model is composed mainly by the legal entity, which we has associated an identifier, let's say, or even multiple identifier. Legal entity also has a registered address towards an address, or it can have an accounting document, or multiple accounting documents. That's the overall picture, I would say, of core business vocabulary. Let's go now in the, let's say, in the issues one by one. Over here with the issue 60, the idea is, let's say, the request is about that we redefine in reality the concept of an address. Because we lack, especially because we lack in core business, the usage of administrative unit. Inside the core business, let's say inside core location, I can show you already in the next slide. Inside the core location, an address has associated an admin unit class that allows you to have more flexibility, because in address you can have admin unit L1, L2, as you can see in the top, let's say, part of the address class, but as a text. And if you want a different level of granularity, then you can use the admin unit class. Now, in the current core business, the relation towards admin unit, it was, let's say, it was missing indeed in the address class, simply because there was no, let's say, no need or no express need. In the issue 60, indeed, we don't want to, let's say, indeed, we are not redefining core address, and we want to keep indeed the full compatibility. So what it's the simply resolution here, it's to keep the admin unit as a property, pointing to admin unit class still, but not adding again another class in the overall picture of the core business vocabulary. It's just simply because address has its own part, and it's, let's say, it's one of the main entities, of course, of the core business vocabulary. But adding admin unit, which will be a secondary class, will be too superfluous, I would say. And then the only thing that we propose is simply to add the admin unit, but just indicate it as a property. It will be in effect a relation towards the admin unit class. And I think on this issue, I would say that's it. Unless you have other comment, this is, I think, could be quite easy issue. There are no cardinalities like for all core vocabulary, so you can add any admin unit, let's say, class eventually. I believe it will expect only one after all, but as in all core vocabulary don't have restrictions on cardinality. So then it means it's up to you to restrict the cardinality if needed in your data model. Any feedback at this point in time now? I need to monitor also the...
I'm keeping an eye on it, don't worry.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I would say on this slide, we can, from this issue, I think we can move forward unless you have anything against it. And especially if it's clear for you. If it's not clear, I can repeat. It's not a problem.
Yeah, just one question.
Yes, please.
Can you hear me? Sorry, my camera was off. My hair is also awful, so probably
No problem.
there was
No problem.
so the range. I haven't looked into the issue, but what's the range of the code here? Is it going to be a SCOS concept, or what are you trying to establish here as the range for the property or domain here?
The admin unit class is composed by code and level, and both of them can be used as a SCOS concept. The code is in reality associated to a SCOS concept. Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thanks.
It's just that we use this as a notation in UML class diagram, and then it's mapped in RDF as a SCOS concept. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thanks a lot.
Well, you're welcome. I think then I move forward to the next. Yeah. Oh, in this issue 59 for core business, it's a little bit more technical in a way. We put it there because it's important also to associate this issue to an activity that we are doing. The issue is about to describe basically all the concepts that are belonging to core vocabularies, which now they can be found under data.europa.eu/mg. That's the persistent URI that is the publication office give to us. All these concepts are already can be found there. From all the core vocabulary are all together, can be downloaded eventually from them. But indeed we miss some metadata that could be indeed associated together with the null ontology. Indeed, it's the request. Indeed, it's fine for us to add such ontology metadata like a label, comment, preferred namespace. That is not a problem. The only thing is we are waiting at the same time, and that's why we bring this issue, because it's also to inform you that we are working also in developing what is called a SEMIC registry. So a registry, not a repository. While a repository stores basically data models, and we have them some examples like in Italy, Norway, or in Finland. A registry basically contains metadata in order to retrieve the let's say information about the models. And that's in this context, we are already preparing indeed the metadata. We are already thinking about the metadata that different let's say data models should have eventually for the registry. And so such metadata could be parsed into the SEMIC registry. So while this is a parallel action, let's say this issue is also connected, because indeed we are already looking how to enrich such let's say all the metadata, what kind of values we need to associate in such metadata. So the idea, yes, we will solve it, but the time, let's say it's just the time to align with the SEMIC registry. I don't know if somebody of you knows such action, but indeed the idea is to provide the possibility for member states to search and retrieve basically data models that are appearing in, let's say, happening in the public administrations in Europe, and therefore fostering a bit collaboration, at the same time interoperability between them. So unless you have some specific comment about the metadata, I think that is the part of this issue. No, I don't believe I've seen comments. In case, Osima, you can tell me, because I cannot monitor. No. I go one step further. Another issue that will probably require some thought, I believe. One second, please. Oh. Within issue 50, there is some proposition to add, let's say, to give the possibility for an identifier of an entity to be expressed let's say this identifier can be provided by or maybe stored in an identifier system, sort of registry that an organization can keep to have all the legal identifier for the company. Currently, a legal entity, you can see on the top right, a legal entity can have two relations, an identifier or even better, a legal identifier for this for the legal entity itself. You see that the identifier class comes from IDMS. The IDMS identifier includes 5 properties: the date of issue of the identifier itself, annotation, which is the identifier itself. For example, the legal entity, the notation includes indeed the identifier, the value of the identifier itself. And then 3 additional properties, which are referring to the agency releasing the identifier, the name of the, let's say, of the scheme to which the identifier reflects. For example, it's a scheme for identity card because some ID cards have dotted notation, something like this. And the URI where such scheme could be found. In the proposed, let's say, issue, let's say the idea is, let's say, the proposed issue here, it's the request, I would say, it is to split the information about the identifier from the identifier scheme or system. In that sense, this would eventually align with another data model, which is coming from ENCFAT transparency protocol, where indeed for them the identifier is, let's say, it's too comprehensive class and would be better to be splitted. In what you can see here on the bottom right, first of all, that we add this identifier scheme class on the right, which includes only the scheme name that was already on the inside the identifier class. And we add some relation from the identifier to identifier scheme, like scheme URI, which was already there, the scheme URI, but now it's not a generic URI, it is pointing to identifier scheme. And in addition, we have 2 relations from an organization issuing the identifier, so the issue relation there. The organization also is owner of such identifier scheme, because then you could have, or you could describe also who is managing such identifier scheme. At the same time, if you look back, the identifier can have the scheme agency name, the name of the agency. And that could be already retrieved from the FOF agent, because you see that in FOF agent in core business, we already put that the agent would have a name. You could have also the legal name from the legal entity eventually. That's not a problem. What I want to say is we want to still keep respecting the original structure, let's say having such properties, scheme agency, scheme name, URI, but making it a more modular way. The counterside of this operation is that we need to require an update of IDMS, because we are slightly bit changing how the IDMS identifier was working before. And so, but indeed, in order to arrive to this kind of approach, let's say to make it more modular, I would like to hear a bit some of you that have an opinion, if this approach is fine for you, or you think that you need even some more property or even more modular. I think from the bottom image, I can see that there is an error. Inside the IDMS identifier, we should have removed the scheme agency and scheme name in the bottom image here. But for the rest, I would say that is the proposition. So having identifier scheme class, adding relations from identifier to identifier scheme, and from the organization to identify and identifier scheme. So then the information is more richer, but also more modular.
Yeah, Alex, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so now we're making kind of an assumption that it's always should be from an organization, or it always should be owners to an identifier scheme, right? Of course, it's in an application way where you look at a specific domain or context, but maybe we should have also an inverse property, right, from the identifier scheme that also looks against an organization or an agent in this case. So you also could have the identifier scheme self-sufficient, right? That would be one of my notes, because otherwise we're always making the assumption that it should go from the organization. Because an identify scheme, you could always have it as a reference data, right? So
Okay.
it could be. I think it should be both ways. Otherwise, we make an assumption, or I think we're not certain about that, like the application or the domain that we're doing here.
Okay, from identifier scheme towards organization. So basically, like is owned by or is
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I think it's, if we take this as a modular approach, and if you want to implement this right, you want to have the inverse of it. Because I would probably, in the case where I want to talk about identify schemes, maybe in some cases I don't have the organization information, right? So you want to have the opposite to be able to fulfill the needs of other applications. In this case, I would say. So
that's clear. Yeah, thank you. I think that is that's a possibility. We need to again. We need to look first in order to do that. We need to look in DMS, because that is a little bit change of DMS first of all. But if it's, I think if the approach is fine for you, let's say if there are no point against of this approach, we can already start to work on this.
Yeah, but I'm talking up for Per here. We're working with the same kind of application here in Sweden for the core business vocabularies. But there are some cases where you have the identifier. Let's say, for example, you register a company specific name. So you have the legal name, and then you have a company specific name for the specific branch of the organization. It's usually the identifier is not contained within the same agency, or the identify scheme as proposed here. So it could be that you would just want to have the reference information in that sense, so that it comes from a disjoint party. But we work together, right, in the context of interoperability. But I think this should allow for both kind of interactions, because otherwise we also assume that the organization having the official register needs to also have the information about the interaction between the organization and the identify scheme. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and then you could have different identifiers, maybe provided by, let's say, with their own identifier scheme. So of course you can have multiple ones to be organized. Okay, no, that's clear. Thank you. Then I would say, if there are no other comments, I proceed.
Yeah.
The next, okay. Yeah. This issue, it's a bit more complex in a way from, we could brainstorm on this. In this issue, we want to deal with the signatory rights, or let's say what is called powers of attorney. This issue is being opened in the context of a Nordic country as well, because indeed which is nice, in their using of core business vocabulary, it is been a new model has been created by adding different classes, those that you see on the right, where you have a beneficial owner, post, signatory rights, and signatory role. So there is a need to describe such signatory rights or for a business per se. And indeed, the Nordic country have provided such model. Now, what you see in continuing on this issue is that in the EU Company Act, already in the legislation that is already in place, in the Article 14, paragraph D, indeed it's written that the appointment of the termination office, in particular of person that basically are authorized to represent the company, it should be basically provided, should be disclosed. and so this this person should be disclosed. In the European Parliament for the proposal for the Company Act, there is a discussion on, let's say, discussion still. It's a draft from the European Parliament, where these so-called powers of attorney will include at least 3 properties that will include basically the scope of the representation for the person authorized for the company, and the type of representation. That's the only information we have from the, let's say, the legal test, at least that we have been found out. And this indeed, this information, the information about the legal representative, is required to be disclosed in business registry. So the Parliament proposal is linked to the EU Company Act that you see on top. Indeed, so you can see indeed from a legal perspective, this is a need. Now, I go back here to the model where you can see the current model proposed by an Nordic country, where you have the legal entity from the core business vocabulary on top left, but then you see the addition of multiple classes like, as I said, the beneficial owner, signatory rights, signatory rule, and post. And with their own expressions. For example, signatory rights, a subclass of criterion, or signatory rule, a subclass of constraint. But this is also these are other type of details. What you see here is that indeed it's complete model on the which is about the signatory rights. What we are proposing here, it's within this next slide, is to add something simpler for time being, which is a power attorney class, considering that this term was used inside the legislation, incorporating the 3 properties that were the European Parliament proposal are doing. Let's say the authorized agent. So you see the powers of attorney, it's the arrow that goes from the powers of attorney towards the agent, which is authorized to represent the legal entity. The scope of representation as a text again, and the type of representation. Of course, here it's a first draft because we need to identify what could be the type, for example. It's a code list, okay, but then we need to identify what are such code values for such power attorney. And so that will be an element that could allow basically to add up eventually more classes, indicating all the other rules, for example, that we were mentioning before. That's, let's say, a first step. But still, there are different points to be, I believe, discussed. As I said, what could be the type, how the power attorneys can be linked to other type of class. I think that it could be the first step. I don't know if there are some people from the Nordic country that can comment, or other people in the working group that would like to provide a feedback on this.
Should I start, or should Per or Micke, do you want to start?
No, you can start.
Yeah.
We can continue, yeah.
Please.
Yeah, very shortly, we have been working further on this. So we're actually planning to make an update on the issue very soon. We are doing the last check now just to qualify it, and it will come up with a new update version or whatever. It's slightly different, and I'll leave to the expert Per or Micke to highlight the main topics. What do you want to continue, Per, or do you want to continue, Micke?
What do you say?
Well, I can say something first. Our model is, we worked on it and we worked further on it, but it's a complete model that will cover like everything around power of attorneys. This suggestion here is to make it a lot simpler.
Yeah,
and I guess this is in line with what they do in brief, where they just say that this person has signatory rights alone or like jointly, or in some other. I think they have like 3 codes in that case: alone, jointly, and other. That is, it's a simplified way to say something about signatory rights.
This is the minimum. Yeah, please.
Yeah, if you follow what's in the law there, I guess that could be enough at least in the first stage. This is better than anything, at least. That's my take on
it. Do you know, or are you aware of any type of representation that we could give as an example? Because I don't know, because, in your case maybe, but it can work in other cases. In order to, because when we create code lists here, when we we try to put code list here, we need to then formalize them, collect from member states, formalize them, and then provide this as input for the publication office, because the publication office is in charge to manage code list together with us. I would say we provide as input to them. And if you have any value that could be possible for this type of representation, then it would be nice. Any value will be fine, just to start with to trigger the discussion. If you then have an update of that model, it would be nice also that you share it. For time being, as I said, we start with what is in law. We could do indeed, we could double check if there is anything indeed that we miss from Breeze side, because that could be useful from the Breeze system, I would say. And then you see, monitor, let's say, your model. But I don't know if there are other countries that need to represent this information. That would be nice to take this moment. If there are countries here that are interested into the power of attorney, let's say, modeling part. No, not at the moment.
So Emilio, Sebastian has put in the chat
yes.
about the project in Germany.
I don't see the chat. I see the double presentation.
No, that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
So Sebastian, would you mind to speak a little bit about that? If you can. We cannot hear you.
Oh.
Hello, try again.
From
Yes.
Berlin, Germany. Sorry for.
There you go. There you go.
In Germany, we have this standardization initiative, X Unternehmen, and they also created code lists to in this specific domain of who can sign a power of attorney and so on. So I suggest you could also have a look on how we managed to do it there. But it's not in line with the European approach. I already saw it, because we don't have the same concept of a legal person in Germany. We have something that is not a legal person, and this breaks up the entire logic of reusing the core components here.
Okay. But since I don't see the chat, if you can put in the chat the reference to that model or to that specification, then it will be nice. Then we look into it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there already a media for us to check later? Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you. You see, because now we are in it's a proposal, and then we can still adjust it along the way. For sure, I will put this into the issue. Let's say, then we can still keep the discussion in the issue.
I raised my hand. I'm sorry for talking so much, but I also work together closely with Per, who just talked. So the concept that we are looking at into the application in there here, especially in Sweden, is that you have, from the power of attorney, you have the type of person, in a sense, with a role. So you have 2 relations. You have one relation that authorizes an agent to be the power of attorney, but we also make an implicit one that is for the role here. So the role, let's say for everyone who's a director, in the context of a company have the power of attorney here, as well as a specific agent in this case. And I think it would make sense to include that as a property from power of attorney that you have, because then you have from an agent, you have a type, right? So you have a role in a case, right? It could be a director or something else, but also that you include a property from power of attorney that explains that are more not like a domain, not a domain level, but a generic level, right? Where you say, right, the directors in the context of this company have the power of attorney. And then it could be more explicit, right? But I think you showed that before immediately in the fourth slide before. It was some kind of close one.
I can go back. This one.
Yeah, exactly. The post thing that you have here.
The post part.
Yeah.
We have it. We have the concept of role in the scope that we created. I will look at it. I understand the reasoning now. I will look at it to see how this could be indeed in eventually integrated. If it's really needed to add in the agent side, or we add it from the signature. Adding another class, I don't know. But let's see.
I think it's like power of attorney or signatory rights would allow it. And I think also because it allows for a lot more flexibility. Where you say, all right, we have everything that is defined as a SCOS concept, or even not in a defined concept scheme, right? We could allow that this is the type of person within a company that has the rights to the signatory rights in this case. So I think it would make sense to have that as like a more of a top level in the case of this. So it's not specific for agent, right? Would make sense.
Yeah. Indeed, I follow you. Indeed, in agent we have the type. You see that there are already from organization ontology there are some relation like head of or etc. But then having multiple relations just to change the level of to change the type of role, I think it would be too much. And also you can have multiple roles. Let's say.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to see. Okay, but okay, that's the rule as a requirement. I think it's fine. Also because if I remember well, in the there is some part of rule in a way in the second point of point D, where we say take part in an administration, supervision, or control of the company. So some sort of role should be there, indeed. If you look at the point 2 of point D. Okay.
Yeah, because it allows for if you want to make like a specific application or be more constrained, be more constrained. I don't know how to say the adjective for that, but having more constraints in your application on a country basis, it makes sense. But you also need to allow the top level here. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to always have it on an agent. I think it's better to include it with the class of what we're looking at, power of attorney and signatory rights, and then have a reference to a SCOS concept or something, I would say.
Okay. Again, now starting from this, we will review in considering the comments now, and we will provide, let's say, a first draft within the issue 48. So then we continue the discussion over there, because it will take some time, of course, in order to make sure that we have at least a minimal agreement on what should be in the model. Then, of course, adding up new relations from the Nordic countries or other countries would be still possible, but at least some basis, it is still there.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Now we are, I don't know if there are other comments.
So before we move on, so Mikael, I see your hand is up. Is that a new hand, old hand?
So it's part of the Nordic comment here. So I would just want to remark that actually this whole issue of the more complex power of attorney model will be raised up. You've probably heard of the EU Business Wallet initiative.
Yes.
By the Commission, and in that context, it will be interesting to see that there's this upcoming new large-scale pilot starting in August. We build, and in that context, I'm personally leading a specific group called the Semantic Group, which will try to lay a semantic foundation for the electronic attestations of attributes that are to be exchanged through the EU business wallets. And we will definitely build everything on top of the EU core vocabularies. So we will do that, but we will also try then to incorporate the ideas that have been developed in the Nordic context and get acceptance to the new ideas from the fellow. There's lots of business registers, for instance, participating in WeBuild. There's almost all the large EU member state countries' business registers are in place, so that it's a good opportunity to create a consensus about what type of a data model a extended power of attorney would look like. And what I'm really I need to mention this in this context because we need to establish some sort of cooperation throughout the LSP with stakeholders who play a role in this, and since a large scale pilot is for 24 months, this work will continue until 2027. So it's in the long run, so to say. So we will definitely be back with this, and I hope that we can establish a good cooperation with the SEMIC team around these issues. And also, it would be really beneficial if we could establish some sort of connection to the persons in the Commission in DG Just who are actually responsible for the draft of this company law directive, because it's a bit vague in all senses when you start data modeling based on that. So especially, for instance, the Article 16b and 16c about power of attorney and the EU company certificate is also not totally clear how you should create a consistent data model based on the article. So some sort of a large cooperation around these issues is really necessary. Thank you.
Michael, I use this opportunity since you said you're leading the semantic team in the EU business wallet. Are you also participating from the once only the OTS system? Are you been because
yeah, I've not participated too actively. I've been following them, but I have a national cooperation with the Finnish representatives who are implementing the OTS in Finland from the ministry. So
okay,
but that's only on a national level. So yeah. But anyway.
Thank you. But yes, of course, that's a way to make the core business evolving, and if there are things that indeed are useful to, let's say, on one end to satisfy member states in compliance on one end with the rule, but also with the law, but also with their needs. That's the first step. Huh? Okay, we let's keep in touch. Yeah, for this.
Just a side note, Emilio,
yes,
because I looked into the issue, should I add my proposal to the issue 48 if you want?
Yeah.
The proposal for the role stuff, because I have some good ideas, I think. I'll add it to the issue. So you have...
No problem. It's a free discussion, so anybody can contribute to the issue, and we try to find at least a minimum agreement. You know? Yeah,
thanks.
Definitely.
So Emilio, before we close this subject, there is a comment on the chat that you cannot see from Andrea. He says that power of attorney is also modeled as a document in e-submission module of EPO, and the legal representative role can have power of attorney.
Okay. So it means that we need to look and also in EPO to find some interoperable.
Yes. Hi. I was about to just look for the ticket too. I will post on it exactly how we have it modeled.
Sorry.
So
yeah.
I will provide the reply there with everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
We are now, it's 1:46. So we could deal with few issues on core person vocabulary, then maybe having a small break of 5 minutes eventually. Then we move towards the second part, which is on CPSV-AP, if it's okay for you. I move to CPSV, core person vocabulary, CPV here in this case. really few issues. The first one, it's about editorial changes. So in the specification which we publish as HTML page, this HTML page, let's say it's automatically generated from the model itself. So certain definitions or usage note, as you might see, come from the model. And then we put, for example, in the date of death, we talk about date of birth, so in the usage note. So we are going to fix this within the next coming release. Or also, for example, the generic data definition not to include the sentence with the period. So simply, we are going to adapt some editorial changes that we found out in core person. In case you find them, more than welcome to update the specification. I move the next one, which is, I think, it's also quite interesting. Let's say issue on issue 45 for the mapping with the person properties with the EIDAS PD schema. In the case of the EIDAS, I would say within core person, we provide a link from the property of a core person towards the EIDAS, let's say, specification. This link is currently broken because the specification has been updated. So we will update that link towards the new one. On the other hand, you need to know that the EIDAS person identifier schema, the PD, defined in this rule book, I put the link, the ARF portal link, defines in general mandatory and optional attributes for what is for a person. As you can see, like family name, given name, birth date, nationality. You need to know that in the context of OTS, SEMIC is collaborating from a standardization point of view within OTS. So where in the once only principle, we try to, let's say, to converge all the member states in adopting only, the proposing only one standard to defining, for example, what is a proof of birth or etc. or other proof of marriage, etc. By reusing existing systems also behind the scenes. One side, let's say, activity that we are doing is to collaborate together with DigiConnect, because DigiConnect works indeed on this part, and they already define indeed different, let's say, attributes for themselves. So we are aligning, we keep aligning together with the DigiConnect on these data fields to make sure that there is indeed an equivalent mapping, let's say, or at least we talk about the same thing semantically, that the meaning of each field is preserved. So that is for sure. In the next release, we are going to update this broken link to the EIDAS person, but then we will continue the long already relation established with DigiConnect to update the specification. I don't know if you have any comment on this. It will require some time, simply because we will from time to time we will collaborate with DigiConnect. It's outside OTS per se, but of course we want to bridge the gap if there are any. Anybody already involving? Yeah, please.
Sorry, Mikael, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
And just as a comment, it's been for 2 years in the previous large-scale pilot in EWC when we have followed the development of the ARF, the Architecture Reference Framework. It's kind of been a bit frustrating. I've every now and then tried to raise the issue that, hey, in the core, when you do the definition of the credential subject schemas, like for a central attribute attestation, like the PID will be, it's a bit alarming that you don't follow EU core vocabularies around this issue, but you come up with your own attributes. So or naming them in a different way. But yeah, that's just my concern here is that there are so many actors in the field of defining both business-related and person-related information that people just don't know about, that there is something good, as good as the EU Core Vocabulary that should be used. So I hope that I can try to promote the Core Vocabularies also in the next step then.
Thank you, Mikael. No, but indeed, that's why it's just to inform you indeed about this, because indeed we found about the IRF, the reference framework, and that's why we are going to keep the collaboration to see, to make sure that we are aligned. Any comments, additional comments? Because that is simply the two issues, I would say, for core person. If there are no other comments, we could do 5 minutes break. So it's 53. Maybe we can restart at 2, if it's okay for you.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you. We will start at 2 p.m. we could start, Osema.
Yes, let's go ahead.
Perfect. 1 second. Then I move to the slide. Okay, now we deal in this part on the issue CPSV-AP, the Core Public Service Vocabulary Application Profile. The current model gives an overview of the current model. The current model is, you see, is much bigger than the Core Vocabularies. The current version is 3.2.0. In the, let's say, we have the public service class in public organization depicted in blue as usual. We always said the important classes, and there are other classes all around. For example, an event, which normally can be a business or life events. We have also all the parts of the public service, let's say, like a requirement or evidence type for a public service, an output for a public service also, for example, the provision ID card. We added in the latest, with the latest version, the concept of service concession contract for the concessions of services. So where you could have eventually an organization, an economic operator that can provide the execution of the service itself. So there are many classes. We will deal with some of them along the next issues. Some issues indeed are mostly editorial ones. Other are will concern some modeling part of them. So I go on the next slide. So in this issue, this issue is mostly editorial. In the HTML specification that we provide, on one end we have in the model a legend. Let's say the data model, it's as a legend with identifying two colors, what are the mandatory and what are the optional classes. And on the other end, on the left, indeed, we also have in the main entities, which including event and participation. So we will remove, the idea is to remove event and participation as a main entity, keeping public organization and public service, which are the two fundamental classes for that, and removing the blue side, let's say, in order to homogenize also with the other data models. The cardinality will stay, as it's an application profile anyhow. It's different from the Core Vocabularies, because in the application profile, we define cardinalities at the property or relation level. So there we need to be precise on this aspect. And so there is no real need to identify in blue let's say, the mandatory class or for the model. So again, removal of the event participation from the main entities on the left-hand side, and changing the, let's say, keeping the color in the same uniform way. So that would be more standardized apart. Unless there are other issues on that you might see, that's the only editorial aspect. We'll go to the next issue. This issue comes from the IOPA, from the Interoperable Europe Act. The idea here is to identify what are so-called cross-border public service. So it's a way to satisfy the Interoperable Europe Act and make sure that we identify services, public services for cross-border operation. So one way, I would say, to do that could be easily to add another property in public service, like a cross-border. This property could be either a Boolean, in the sense that, okay, this public service is done for cross-border purposes, or having basically a code list that would allow to identify public service in terms of if it's a national or cross-border or for other type of values. That's the only, let's say, that's the only requirement that comes from to CPSV-AP from the Interoperable Europe Act, unless you see others, but that was now demanded in this issue 138. So I wonder if among the member states present here today, there is such a need, and if you already satisfy such a need in a way by identify the services, public services in that way. Of course, now it's already possible to describe public services by looking at their sectors, spatial, so the geographical location could be still, let's say, the property could be still satisfy the minimum, at least for which location could be the public services, let's say, associated with. But then the inner, let's say, the nature of cross-boarding is still not there. It's not easy to understand if this public service can be used for cross-border. So I wonder if you need if you have basically some reflection.
Yeah, I would. I think it makes sense. There's been other cases. I don't know which. It's one of the core vocabularies where we look at jurisdiction, right? I think it's the residency and citizenship part in the core person where we look at that. So I think it will be interesting in some way to establish this concept scheme, because I think it could be reused in a lot of other contexts as well. Because national cross-border, yeah, that will work as a Boolean, but I think it would be nice to have some concept scheme because then you could add to it as well. If we just have a Boolean value here, it's kind of definitive, but if we have a code list, I think it would make sense. It allows to further develop it in the future. So, but Boolean would work at the moment, right? But I think it would take into consideration how it goes in the future. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what other people say in the group, but I think there's different kind of time spans to it, or time periods, I would say.
Do you have actual need on this, or let's say identify cross-border public service, or not at all?
No, I don't. It's like, I think it's in general, I work with a lot of, not from also from a national point of view, but if we take like the service, I think it's mentioned in the chat as well, it's to allow to say, all right, this is a service that is applicable in different kinds of contexts, right? But I think it's also a good code list to reuse in more kind of specific use cases. As we work in Sweden, we try to follow as much as we can when it comes to the things that comes from SEMIC, and also if we look at DKDP, that's a data portal, but we also try to reuse this code list in more specific data models. So let's say, for example, a municipality or an agency want to talk about a specific data set. We usually look towards the authority tables. And I think this is a context that hasn't been, we have a similar one when it comes to, I think it's for the agent in the KDP, right? Where we have the type of actor or type of agent, where we say if it's a government institution or national agency, etc. I think this is a topic we haven't covered yet. So I think it's a good time to look into actually establishing this, because it's going to be reused in different parts. I don't think it's not going to be only on an application level, on a national level, but it's also going to be applicable for specific actors in different contexts. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Emilio, there are people that are showing support to this idea of the code lists in the chat.
That's good. But then it means that, we can propose at least those two values, national or cross-border, for time being, within the issue itself. If you come with other value that could be interesting, then let's say we can still discuss.
Emilio, I think this should be in line with the other requirements of the Interoperable Europe Act, because the public service also has to do interoperable assessment when it's funded by you or when it's a base service. So it sounds a bit strange to model cross-border as Boolean. So
no, it's okay. It was a way to trigger the discussion in a way to say, but okay, I can propose a Boolean, it's reductive, I understand. A code list, it's better because indeed I agree it's flexible. I'm not the one exactly following up on Europact. It's a colleague of mine, which unfortunately is not present today. But if there are indeed other requirements, we can need to integrate them in the CPSV-AP. Like you said, founded by EU. Yeah.
We found the need to characterize services beyond EU borders. Most of the times when I discuss with colleagues, is the service cross-border, they ask for what you're talking about, just EU or outside of EU space. So you have a third value there at least, and that would be helpful at least.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I see that Marco also has a hand up. Marco.
Yes, thank you. As I said in the comments, a code list would be useful, but what other values would be allowed? If it's only two values, it basically would be the same as a Boolean. And on the other end, in the Netherlands, we have a distinction between the target audience, either locals or people from the country, but not from the municipality, or people from other member states. So that might be an alternative to specify whether it's a cross-border public service or not.
Even more granular, I would say, because here, if we do 2-3 values, now we're talking about outside EU. It's indeed a small list, but indeed with the target audience, you could have, because I do remember we have the addressee in this case here. In the public service, you have the first property is addressee, so it's basically to whom the public service is addressing. So okay, you could have a even more granular eventually. Yeah.
Is there a code list for addressee at the moment?
Not that. No.
Okay, so it's a free.
It's just a way to say, well, if you want to identify them, it would be nice to have a code list for this.
Addressee, I talked about this, I think, in the last meeting, and then I didn't submit the issue because I accepted Evidio's idea of looking at addressee with more careful, without just putting concepts into the model that shouldn't be there. But we might look at it. I think if we need to specify or characterize better the addressee, then I think we will have problems with the model. For what I've researched with what we have now, because if you put person there, then you would have to change a couple of things, for example. But with the person outside of my question, with the persons outside of the EU space, it touches even authentication in a public service. For example, you might have EIDAs by default inside the EU space. If you have people outside, I know some countries have the ability to authenticate or to identify people from outside of Europe. But if some countries don't have those means already available, they should at least have the distinction in a service characterization for their portals or for their applications. So that's why I mentioned it.
Okay, clear. No, that's clear. But we will again. Now we at least we decided for code list. We start to propose the 2-3 at least values. We can find an agreement over the issue, and then what we can do is propose this into the publication office to see if we can formalize it. We will have, in any case, there is some time to do it before we go to the release, and then also the important thing that first of all the property is in the model from this side, and then the formalization can even take some more time in order to decide for the one. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I think we can move. Are there any other comments, Osema?
No, I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Oh, Okay, thank you. Then I move to the next. It's the issue. Okay, the issue 137. It's about the description of municipal service. Here in this issue, I think I've seen Jim Young also because from Norway demanding if in other member states, that's a good moment also to keep the let's say the discussion here. If you would like to describe different levels of public service, so you could have a different level in terms of implement the same public service, generic public service, like providing an ID card. Okay, but that's quite generic. You could describe that way. But then you could have describe the service at municipality level, so at single instance level. The proposition here to accommodate, let's say, this part would be indeed to add a property level in the public service as still a code, so you could have different levels in a country, and also a relation to itself in reality to another the generic public service, saying that this public service is an instance of the generic one, so like I said, the generic ID card. I don't know if this can satisfy, first of all, the need from Norway, and also from let's say other countries that might be interested in having the different level of description of public service.
I think it looks really nice, because in some cases you have a public service is only only applicable when it is a municipality. And so in the case of Sweden, we have that case with a lot of services that are only on a municipal level. And there are some cases where you have the municipal service is actually an instance of something that is on a regional or national level. So I think this makes sense to apply because it allows for both kinds of services, right? And also if you want to have a relation, it makes sense. I think it looks really good, actually, because that was a question I was going to ask, and then you also answered it directly, Emilio. So I think it looks really nice.
Okay, glad to hear that.
Okay. We also have Jim and Marco. Jim, please go ahead.
Yes, please.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Does generic also mean abstract?
Oh, sorry.
Because, I can imagine that generic services, such as the parking permit, are only offered at the local level and not at the generic level. So there would be no channels, for instance, no generic cost, not even an organization, but an organization level, namely municipal. And the instance level, of course, would have all these relations and attributes to specific municipalities. So the generic service would not have many relations, including the mandatory relation to a public organization, I guess. Is that mandatory?
But that is mandatory because in any case, I understand your point. Because in the current model, indeed, it's mandatory that the public service is provided by a public organization. In the case of a generic service, I understand that you will not apply such mandatory relation. I see your point.
You should have the option to specify that it's a municipal product or service, but not which, or you should relate them to all of them. But that's a bit too much, I guess.
No, but the observation
something that needs to be considered at least.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but aren't we oversimplifying with an attribute called level, when some countries might not have that hierarchy in organizations at all, and then mixing it up with some jurisdiction or location or something relative to that? Because at least in my country, the municipalities are autonomous, so they are the top level competent authority in those public services. A parish might be autonomous in some public services, so it's even lower. It would be lower, and I'm quoting because I didn't turn on the camera, but isn't it oversimplifying just putting a code list there? What would that code list have, and would it be applicable to all member states? My question.
But if indeed you aside the level, you need to have the spatial property where you define exactly the location for it. The level is indeed the level of the public service in terms of, in a way, I don't say,
Yeah, but what is a level? If the competent authority is a municipality, it's the top level. There's no other level. What's level? So you see,
I don't know. Yeah, I see. But I believe in other countries it's not always the same.
Of course,
we can see first of all if is there Jim Younger in the call, because that is you open the issue first, and then
yes, I'm here.
I wonder if this. Thank you, Jim, to be in. I wonder if that is first of all a way to satisfy the need, and indeed if levels, in your case, there can be multiple levels.
I understand the proposition that level is with the codes instance or generic. So it's not the level of the organizations, as I understand the proposition. So that's the one thing about level. The other thing is the generic versus instance of services. Then
yes.
Marco said what I wanted to say, that not all the properties are mandatory at the instance versus generic level.
Indeed.
So if you solve this mandatory problem, then it's okay for us to have two different levels: generic level with fewer mandatory properties than at the instance level. You have, for instance, competent authority, which is mandatory at the instance level, but not at the generic level, for instance.
Yeah, but
and also costs, as Marco said. Yeah.
Sorry, Media. I think now I understand Jim's proposition. So what if I got it right, you're trying to identify an abstract public service, let's call it, some upper level public service, and a more specific instance of a public service within the municipality.
Yeah, because we have a generic.
If that's the idea, I'm full thumbs up. And
okay.
I'm shutting down my mic.
No problem. It's a discussion. No, indeed, because indeed in CPSV-AP you could use it to describe a generic service, but also you could describe the
we have that precisely. So it would be awesome for us. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, we need to define maybe the value of this level. Anyhow, if it's we say that is let's say that is an instance relation, it's fine. But if you want to define multiple level, let's say, because I think there were 3 type of levels: conceptual level, right? It's we have different type of level. Yeah, let's say even it's generic or it's an instance of it, and then thanks to this level you can filter them out. Or
I think there are 3: generic, instance, and then the execution.
Generic execution, right?
Yeah. I think Marco wrote about that in the issue.
Okay.
3 different levels: generic, instance, and then the execution.
Execution.
Yeah.
Okay. Clear. Thank you.
And again, those 3 different levels have different sets of properties.
We need to see which one basically are mandatory, not mandatory. Definitely the one of public organization. I understand that if you describe a public service in the generic way, like providing a ID card or permit, like Marco said, then you don't need you are not obliged to put a public organization associated with, because that is at the instance level, at the execution level. It's clear. Let's see if there are no other comments. We can proceed next.
Yep.
I will go next. Yeah. Let's say in this moment, let's say we discussed two issues together with. It's a way also to let's say, first of all, brainstorm on the top level, and it is associated to the let's say to the other issue that we just discussed. It's about indeed the fact that in a public service can be described in a generic way, like we describe it in a design phase. What kind of public service we want to first of all conceptualize, and then indeed we identify, for example, for a public service, what are the required evidence, or what are the output. The thing is, indeed, we have now in CPSV-AP a class output, which is indeed linked to a public service. A public service produces a certain output. However, that is different from the possible output that a public service could produce, because if we distinguish indeed the public service, a generic one, from the real execution one, let's say the one that is indeed acting on the moment, describing, for example, I generate, let's say, I provide as an output this ID card, or digital ID card, imagine, for example. Then the potential output of this public service, possible output, could be a generic ID card, but not necessarily that instance. Indeed, with this issue, the idea is to split better what is possible for a public service to, let's say, to be described with, and what is exactly producing or having, let's say, as a type of evidence. So also the public service at the same time, it's already connected with the evidence type. You see there is a relation as input type on the bottom of the diagram. So the idea indeed is to change on one end the output class, suggest to split basically, because in the output class we already have the type property, as you can see on the left, and moving this type property towards another class, which is output type, maybe even adding a name for this output type, which allowed for a generic service, a generic public service, to describe the possible output. And so in that sense, creating also a relation, a better relation between output and the possible output type. So they say, well, okay, I describe as a generic public service a possible output, which is an ID card, and the instance of the service, let's say the execution time, we identify the real output, which is the ID card for that person, etc. So the first approach is indeed, you see, adding this class output type in equivalence, I would say, with what we have already in public service for evidence type and evidence. Now, in this diagram, you see only evidence type, but in the diagram, you have next to evidence type also the class evidence, which is conform to such evidence type. So in the same way between evidence and evidence type, we would like to add the output and output type. This output type can even be a subclass of SCOS concept in order to be interoperable, let's say as a code list, but then adding the possibility at least to add a name or a description for such possible output type. I don't know if it's clear, and then if it's okay for you such a proposition or such a request. In that case, I think.
So Emilio, Sebastian has a question in the chat. Shouldn't it be called has required evidence type?
Yes, indeed. I think it will be better, yeah. Because indeed we point to evidence type and not to evidence, so it will be better for that. Thank you. I don't know if Jim Young, you want to comment on this, if it's for you. Because I remember you were in the issue. If it's okay for you.
Thank you. It solves our need that we may have different levels to different levels. Then we have to think and at the national level to specify what output type may contain of properties. As I read the proposition, the output type is currently an empty class from SEMIC.
But I think at least adding a name on the description, we could add it. And then in order to be compatible with the previous version output, because there was already type code, we could envisage to use property from SCOS, let's say for the label and the description. So at least it's more interoperable with SCOS. I don't know if there are any other country that have such a need in order to basically distinguish what is the exact output from the possible one. No. Okay. In any case, we will formalize this in the issue. So giving some time indeed, and also as a possible output type. Yes, I saw the chat passing through. Thank you, Sebastian. Yes, indeed, since it connects to output type, the as possible output type would be better. It's a bit longer, but makes sense semantically. But yeah, I would say we formalize this in the issue, and then let's say once we are, if there are no other, let's say, comments, we can put this in the next release of CPSV-AP. I move forward.
Yes.
This issue it's a bit more simpler in that respect, but it's also related to, you see, the discussion with the evidence and evidence type, because here we talk about the required language for the evidence to that must be submitted during a public service interaction. So there is already a relation between public service and evidence type. So simply to satisfy this type of requests, the proposition is to add the language in the evidence type property to see, let's say, to express such the language in which the evidence should be conformed to. You already have a language as a linguistic system inside the evidence. The idea is to make it equivalent, so then you can even have a correspondence, in a way, validate that such evidence type was provided, let's say, was provided with a certain language, and then you can conform this evidence with that evidence type. So adding a language property in the same way for evidence, also for evidence type. Unless there you have other, let's say, comments on this. I think it is a little bit more simpler than the previous ones. I don't remember who created this issue, but it should be, I'd say the proposition should satisfy the need, at least for that. This was indeed, this is the last of the issues for CPSV-AP. I think we can move forward to the latest part of the presentation, unless there are any comments. If you have any other comment, again, you can open an issue on GitHub or follow up on those issues that we discussed before. I move forward.
Yeah. You can go ahead, Media.
Yeah. So in when we do in SEMIC we provide different specifications. The specification is usually published as an HTML page, but then there are different artifacts that we provide together with to satisfy different needs. You might have known JSON LD context to support, for example, semantic enrichment of API. On the other hand, we provide shackle shapes to have conformance towards the specification, etc. One of the latest let's say the latest type of artifact we provide are the so-called XML schema. Because indeed in the transmission of let's say data, XML is still used in different public administration, in different systems. On SEMIC, in the GitHub repository, you can find the XML schema repository, where there are already the draft of different core vocabularies. You see them: business, core criteria evidence, location, person, public event, public organization. So on one end, we invite you once more to provide feedback on such XML schema. We tried to make them, let's say, on one end flexible, but let's say respecting, first of all, the current models, and the other hand, you might imagine that XML schema also provides its own constraints, as like any other language. So we try to make them as reusable as much as possible. You need to know also that we are also working on the latest version. We will be working on the latest version for CPSV-AP. So it's for an application profile. But having already, since CPSV-AP reuses, for example, core location or core public organization, having already comments on the drafted XD, it's already important. Then that comments, if integrated, can be indeed reused for the creation of CPSV-AP in XML schema. So that's simply inviting you, if you have the possibility or if you have a need to use the core vocabulary in form XML, then it's nice to receive some feedback. So then it can be integrated in the next phase for CPSV-AP without redoing the work back and forward. I don't know if you have any comment on this.
No, so far.
No. Okay. Thank you. Then I think we are towards the end. I would say, in terms of wrap-up, thanks in any case for joining this meeting. We will address all these further issues of the core vocabularies and looking at what has been basically agreed along today. Continue on certain parts of modeling because there are certain things that require some time in terms of finalizing the modeling side. And then we will inform you when there will be a next webinar. We'll say after summer. Now we are already half of June. You will see other type of webinar coming from SEMIC in different topic. Then I would say thanks a lot for joining today. We managed to finish on less than 2 hours, which is already good. And again, if you have any feedback, please continue on GitHub. We can continue the discussion later.